Tamgor and his convoy of space dwarves were approaching the rendezvous point in what was once an Altarian settlement that had since been reduced to ruins following a period of blazing urban warfare in the past. The dwarven smuggler was about to meet his client, High Elf Lord Tyriel, to deliver an ancient artifact in exchange for a substantial reward. The armoured truck at the front of the convoy suddenly stopped, forcing those behind to follow suit. The passengers flooded out of the vehicles, and after an exchange of raised voices, the dwarves took up arms and scattered into battle formation. To their horror, they had realized that they have driven into a small nest of hive aliens that was just about to animate out of hibernation. This is a battle report for a game of OnePageRules Grimdark Future version 3.4.1. It is played using the basic rules with 2000 point lists adhering to force organization. I play the dwarf guilds while my opponent uses the alien hives. Here is my list. A dwarf champion will lead a combined unit of 10 iron veterans, all with iron blasters. With the Guild Lord upgrade, the unit will be able to fire a maximum of 23 AP 2 shots that hit on 3+. In addition to the decent 3+ defense, one of the veterans have the medical training upgrade, which gives the unit regeneration for added survivability. They will be carried by an APC transport so that they can close in on the enemy and punish them with their guns. Similarly, there is a combined unit of 10 dwarf warriors with shotguns. Their short-range shotguns will be able to fire a total of 20 AP1 shots a turn. They too will have their own transport. A combined unit of 6 thunder supports will provide long-range indirect artillery fire with blast. Another dwarf champion with the Guild Lord upgrade will accompany them, giving the mortar rounds an additional AP. There are 2 units of 5 guardians. They are cheap units to shield the artillery from enemy attacks, as well as grabbing objectives wherever possible. Finally, I have 2 units of miners. These guys are tunnelers, which means they can ambush, but they can deploy extra close to the enemy. They're low on quality defense and range, but they're cheap and can again be used to screen off the enemy. Plus, their AP2 shotguns can potentially be a nasty surprise. For my opponent's list, the forces of the Hive will be led by Hive Lord Fluffy. It is an absolute monster in melee, capable of dealing 12 AP 4 attacks. In case that isn't enough, it can also do 4 stomping attacks. Not only is it capable of dealing damage, it can take a lot too, since it is tough 12 and has both psi barrier and regeneration on top of a base defense of 2+. Next, we have Isaac Newton and the Sweet Things, that is to say, a Synapse Tyrant Isaac, leading a combined unit of 10 Psycho Grunts: Cupcake, Candy Floss, Marshmallow, Skittle, Pancake, Brownie, Custard, Tart, Sweetie, and Banana. The Synapse Tyrant is caster 3, with access to a list of some nasty spells. The Psycho Grunts have the Spell Warden ability, which gives the Synapse Tyrant a +1 to one of the spellcasting rolls every turn. Obviously, it also means there are 10 models to remove before the Synapse Tyrant can be damaged. Furthermore, the Synapse Tyrant has Neurosomatic Healing, which gives a +1 bonus to regeneration rolls to a friendly unit that has it, and in this list there's quite a few that do. The third hero in this list is the Winged Prime Warrior, going by the name of Spot. Its wings give it the ability to ambush and fly. Its serrated blades give it 6 AP 4 attacks in melee, and of course it has psi barrier and regeneration too. There is a combined unit of Hive Swarms: the Beetles, S-Bug 7, Abug, the Buggles, Bugs Life, and Spice Bugs. They are perfect for capturing objectives while soaking up damage. We have 3 Venom Beasts: Ed, and Eddie. They have reliable whip attacks that are poison and can also spew out poison mist. Next, we have Cuddles, the Shadow Hunter. It is an ambush unit with razor whips, suited to take out light infantry. Finally, we have 3 Shadow Leapers, Bill, Bob and Ben. Again, they are units that can ambush and have 12 AP4 attacks. The board is set up with rocks and building ruins. These are impassable, line-of-sight blocking terrain features. Other than these, there are no difficult or dangerous terrain as we both agreed to keep it simple. Having rolled a 1 on a d3, 3 objective markers are placed on the battlefield. The alien hives win the roll-off for board edge selection and initiative, so they deploy first. For the dwarves, the 2 units of miners are placed in reserve, while the aliens have the Prime Warrior, the Shadow Hunter, and the Shadow Leapers placed in reserve. The dwarves will have the Iron Veterans accompanied by a Dwarf Champion inside the red lorry on the right flank, and the Dwarf Warriors in the yellow lorry on the left. The alien swarms begin the round by rushing forward onto Objective 3. In response, the yellow truck advances forward and fires upon them. The rounds fired from its turret deal 3 wounds, enough to remove a single model. The venom beasts then rush forward towards the center, ending up right behind the building wall. The first squad of Dwarf Guardians advance forward, spreading their line in front of the support artillery. The Synapse Tyrant moves across to the left, followed by its Psycho Grunts. It invokes Regenerator on the Hive Lord to grant it a +1 on its next regeneration roll. It doesn't cast any spells this round, so it will have an additional 3 spell tokens at the start of the next round. The team of Thunder Support targets the swarms. The 4 models in range take shots. Just one of the mortar rounds land on the target, dealing 3 hits due to blast, and causes 3 wounds, taking out the second model from the unit. The Hive Lord moves forward behind the swarms, ready to start eating into the left flank of the dwarves. The Dwarven warriors disembark the yellow APC and continue the attack on the swarms. Their shotgun fire deals another 8 wounds, removing another 2 models, and the penultimate model is down to 1 wound. Having lost so many models, the swarms are forced to take a morale test and fail, leaving them in a shaken state. On the other side of the battlefield, the red APC drives forward towards the building where the venom beasts have taken cover behind. The Dwarf Champion and the Iron Veterans disembark and unleash a salvo from their Iron Blasters. Out of the 23 AP2 shots, 16 of them hit, but with some good dice rolls for defense, only half of the hits cause wounds. Nevertheless, it is enough to remove 2 models, and the unit is on its last wound. Unfortunately, it doesn't do as well on the morale test, which leaves the last venom beast shaken. Finally, the second unit of Dwarf Guardians move back in order to protect the left side of the Thunder Support from ambush units that may come in the next round. At the end of the round, the Dwarves capture Objectives 1 and 2, and the Hive Aliens capture Objective 3. At the start of the round, both sides declare ambush. The aliens deploy first with their Shadow Hunter, emerging on the right of the Iron Veterans and the red APC. In response, the Dwarven miners pop out of the ground, forming a line in front of the Shadow Hunter that blocks it from charging the Iron Veterans. The Shadow Leapers then appear further down behind the building wall of the ruins next to the Dwarven artillery. In order to protect the artillery's right, the second unit of miners emerge, forming a protective line. However, the Shadow Leapers take the dwarves by surprise as they run with fiendish swiftness through the gap between the defense lines to charge at the Iron Veterans. The razor-sharp claws deal 6 wounds, but owing to the Dwarven medical training, the Iron Veterans manage to save 2 of them by regeneration. The hardy dwarves fight back and deal 4 wounds against their assailants. The combat is a draw. The first unit of miners turn around and finish off the Shadow Leapers with their iron shotguns. The Hive Lord charges at the Dwarf warriors. It stomps the dwarf to the ground, and then with a whirlwind of slashing attacks, it fells 5 more dwarves. The dwarf warriors fight back and manage to deal a single wound on the towering alien monster, but they lose the combat by a hefty margin. Luckily, the dwarves pass the morale test and stand their ground. The warriors try to stay on target and rush forward. The Synapse Tyrant joins the fray. It begins by invoking Regenerator on the last Venom Beast, boosting its regeneration roll. It then casts Terror, targeting the Dwarf Warriors and the Iron Veterans. The 2 units are affected by the spell and gain a -1 modifier on their next morale tests. The Synapse Tyrant then casts Shriek at the same 2 units, and they both take 4 hits each. The Iron Veterans weather the attack without any casualties, but yet another Dwarf Warrior falls to the sonic disruption. Despite the effect of Terror, they actually manage to pass the morale test. The Synapse Tyrant then casts Overwhelm, targeting the Iron Veterans. They take 3 AP4 hits, of which 2 goes through. The Alien Psychic continues the attack, unleashing heavy Psytorrent upon the Iron Veterans. Another 2 Iron Veterans fall. Again, despite the terror, the Iron Veterans muster the courage that keep the unit together. They advance towards the aliens and decide to split fire between the last Venom Beast and the Synapse Tyrant. The Dwarf Champion fires at the Venom Beast, but only one of the shots hit, and thanks to the enhancement it received from the Synapse Tyrant, the regeneration roll successfully keeps the Venom Beast alive. The remaining Iron Veterans also perform poorly, hitting their target once but failing to cause any wounds. The Shadow Hunter runs and leaps at the APC from its rear. The takedown attack hits but fails to penetrate the APC's armor. The Shadow Hunter starts lashing its razor whips at the vehicle. As the sharp filament-like tentacles start chipping away the armor plate, the driver of the red APC panics and the engine stalls. After having a shouting match among themselves, the APC crew manage to get the engine running again. The remnants of the alien swarms rally and become unshaken. The Thunder supports target the Synapse Tyrant and the Psycho Grunts. 4 out of the 6 rounds land on the target, causing 12 hits. And just like that, the Psycho Grunts guarding the Synapse Tyrant are wiped out. The Synapse Tyrant passes its morale test. The Venom Beast comes to and becomes unshaken. The yellow APC moves forward and fires again at the swarms. It hits and wounds twice, leaving the unit with just 1 model with 2 wounds remaining. Remarkably, it manages to pass its morale test. The remaining dwarf units, the 2 units of Guardians and the 2nd unit of Miners, rush forward. At the end of the 2nd round, both sides keep control of the same objectives as they did in the previous round. The alien Prime Warrior descends from the sky on the left. The Hive Lord begins with its assault on the yellow APC. It tackles at the side of the vehicle, causing it to topple over. With the vulnerable underside exposed, the Hive Lord dices up the vehicle with its serrated blades as if the APC was made out of tofu. The Dwarven transport is taken out. The Hive Lord consolidates towards Objective 2, just falling short of reaching it. The Dwarf Champion leads the Iron Veterans towards the enemy. Once again they split fire. This time the Dwarf Champion manages to finish off the Venom Leaper, but the shots fired from the Iron Veterans fail to wound the Synapse Tyrant. In return, the Synapse Tyrant moves closer to Objective 2 and casts Shriek again at the Dwarf Warriors and the Iron Veterans. It yields the same result as the previous round, as another Dwarf Warrior falls victim to the attack, while the Iron Veterans survive it. The Synapse Tyrant then picks a new target for its heavy Psytorrent and kills 3 Guardians. Both the Dwarf Warriors and the Guardians pass their morale tests. The first unit of miners pursue the Shadow Hunter. Only 3 of them manage to get in range to shoot, but they manage to cause 2 wounds on the Shadow Hunter. Unfazed, the Shadow Hunter charges at the Guardians and make light work finishing them off. The second unit of Guardians run away from the Prime Warrior, as well as getting closer to both Objectives 1 and 2. The winged Prime Warrior flies and lands on the upper levels of the building, overlooking Objective 2. The duo of Dwarf Warriors finally make it to Objective 3 and finish off the alien swarms with their shotguns. The Thunder support fire upon the Shadow Hunter. Despite not benefiting from Blast, they manage to deal 2 more wounds on the Shadow Hunter. The Shadow Hunter is now heavily wounded, but shows no sign of faltering as it passes its morale test. The red APC pursues the Shadow Hunter and tries to shoot it down, but the turrets fail to cause any more wounds. At the end of the round, the Dwarves capture all 3 objectives. However, they are losing units fast and don't have an awful lot of firepower left, not to say anything of some slow units that are unlikely to do much more in the next round. The aliens still have the Hive Lord, Synapse Tyrant and the Prime Warrior all at more or less full strength. So as we enter the final round of the game, will the Dwarves manage to hold their claim over the objectives, or will the forces of the alien Hives devour the Dwarves and take back control? The heavily wounded Shadow Hunter charges at the Guardians again. The Dwarves form a shield wall, but the alien whip ensnares a dwarf by his ankles, and he is yanked out of formation and is dragged on the ground. The Shadow Hunter then swings its whip, throwing the poor dwarf right back at his comrades. He crashes right into one of them, and they inadvertently stab each other with their spears. The remaining Guardians attack the Shadow Hunter and deals a single wound, which means the Shadow Hunter survives with 1 wound remaining. The Dwarven Guardians lose the combat, and following a failed morale test, they become shaken, which is as good as dead on the last round. The red APC drives over to Objective 3, reinforcing the claim over it while providing the surviving Dwarf Warriors some cover. The Synapse Tyrant advances over Objective 2 in the center. While doing so, it attempts to finish off the Iron Veterans. However, the attempts to cast Terror and Shriek both fail. It then unleashes Heavy Psytorrent that picks off yet another veteran Dwarf, but the Dwarf Champion's inspiring leadership holds the unit together. The Thunder supports move over Objective 1, covering as much ground to deny access to it for the enemy. The Hive Lord is delighted at the sight of yet another substantial meal in the red APC. It charges it and finds no problem at all destroying it. At this point, it seemed like a narrow victory was at hand for the Dwarves, with no way for the alien Prime Warrior to physically reach Objective 1. Objectives 2 and 3 would be contested once the Dwarf Champion and the last Iron Veteran placed their feet on Objective 2, resulting in 1-0 victory. In order to force the Prime Warrior's activation, a unit of Dwarf Miners activate and hold position. However, little did I realize the Prime Warrior was in charge range of the Dwarf Warriors. It swoops onto Objective 3 and instantly beheads the remaining dwarves, turning the area into a dwarf-free zone. Finally, the Dwarf Champion and the Iron Veteran runs to contest Objective 2. At the end of the game, the forces of the Hive capture Objective 3 and contests Objective 1 against the Dwarves. The result is a 1-1 draw. Tamgor sat down in a tight space of a cargo bay full of crates. He managed to contact a fellow smuggler who had owed him from a previous heist to arrange an extraction, and after fleeing the devastating battle against the Hive aliens, Tamgor was picked up by a small freight craft. Having lost many of his battle crew and the shipment he promised to deliver to the elves, his heart had already sank to his boots. It was then that it occurred to him, was it really just a stroke of misfortunate coincidence that led him to the alien Hive? Or was this set up by one of his own? Perhaps there was an imposter among them. It was all starting to appear very sus. Boy, that was intense. As ever, the aliens are quite a formidable force. Obviously, the Hive Lord just about ate up everything it touched, but the Synapse Tyrant was doing so much in one activation. The multiple spellcasting and its ranged attack made me quite anxious. I definitely got away lucky not failing some of those morale tests, particularly for those units that were affected by terror. The Dwarves play completely different to the High Elf fleets that I used to play previously. For a start, I got to use a lot of models, so many, in fact, that I had to buy movement trays. Of course, this meant that in most rounds my opponent got to activate first. Another thing is that for the most part I am stuck with a lower 4+ quality, which was particularly nerve-wracking when it came to morale tests, since these dwarves don't have fearless rerolls either. The fact that the entire army is slow, barring the transport, made them quite tricky to use too. I tried to make use of the miners to screen off my more precious units, but my opponent did a good job ignoring them and they were left too far away from the centre where the action was taking place. Anyway, another fun game played.